Hello and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. So, Graham, we talk about corporate escape often enough, and we talk about how to set a new career up and so on. But what about doing things so that you can spend more time having an adventure?
Almost like having a bucket list. And our guest today is an amazing young woman, because she's younger than Kevin and I. But I'm not going to tell you by how much, but you can guess yourself because she's crammed so much into her life. Her name is Julia Goodfellow-Smith. And that begs the question, Julia, what would happen if Goodfellow fought Smith? Who'd come out on top?
Oh, Goodfellow every day.
That's good.
Guess which one I was in the partnership.
Yeah. I was thinking that this morning. Shall I lead with that this morning? I was, go on, then. Well, I love Smith. It's in my name as well. But yeah, I kind of like Goodfellow as well. So, Julia, you left corporate, didn't you? And this was around the COVID period, and you started to do different things, didn't you?
I did. I actually left corporate life fully back in 2004, so a long time ago.
Long time ago.
Oh yeah,
long time ago. And then
experienced corporate escapee this morning, Graham.
Sure.
Yes, indeed.
Sure.
But then I decided, for some strange reason, to go back into corporate life. So I then had 11 months back in corporate life.
I see.
And that's the escape that you're talking about.
I'm referencing the one that you kind of left because a job. Yeah, you were doing it, but you maybe didn't quite like it as much as you should have done, and then you went off to do much more important things.
I did. I was working for a construction company as an environmental manager, which is very important to me, looking after this wonderful planet that we live on.
Yeah.
I was commuting every day. I had a long commute. I wasn't particularly enjoying my work, and then I had a health scare, and I thought to myself, well, why continue doing this, being miserable for so much of my life when I could be out actually enjoying myself?
You don't look anything other than very fit as an individual, but we'll find out a little bit more as to why. But even you were saying beforehand that you were a gymnast when you were younger, much younger in your teens. And basically, one of the things about that is that to be a gymnast, you got to be pretty fit anyway, haven't you? I mean, but have you been fit pretty much most of your life? And when you had that health scare, that must have really shook you, I guess.
I have been fairly fit for most of my life. I doubt I will ever be as fit again as I was when I was a gymnast, but that's the nature of teenage sport, I suppose, when you're competitive. The illness that I had, the health scare, it was actually whooping cough, which is astonishing because I've had the vaccine as a child. I think I might even have had a booster as an adult, and yet I still caught whooping cough. And nobody knew what it was. It took the medical profession months to work out what it was. And in the meantime, they did lots of tests on my respiratory system. And they found that I had, what do they call it? Restricted pulmonary function.
Oh, right.
And that's fine. I've been like that all my life. I've just always thought that I've got small lungs. And so when we found out that this cough that was really laying me low, I mean, I was coughing all day, but I was going into work and going home, eating, sleeping, repeat. At the weekends, I was sleeping to recover. Yeah. It was no life at all for 3 months.
Sure.
And when I left the consultant's office and he'd said it was whooping cough, I thought, oh, well, that's great because whooping cough has no long-lasting effects for adults. That's fantastic. And in passing, as I left the room, I said, and this business of small lungs, I said, that'll just continue as normal, will it? And he said, oh, no. He said, as you get older, you'll be particularly susceptible to respiratory disease.
Oh, great.
At which point I thought, oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Why am I in this job now when I could be out having an adventurous life now? And if I need to go back and sit in an office for later on in my life when I can't potentially breathe properly any longer, then I can do it then. Yeah. So that was a real trigger for me.
I mean, that was 2-3 years ago. And have you been checked up since? And have you got another diagnosis about the size and the power of your lungs?
No, I haven't been checked up since. Everything has continued as normal.
Yeah.
I wasn't considered to be particularly at risk when the coronavirus pandemic came along, although that was only a couple of months later. So I felt very much at risk.
Yeah.
Because if you're susceptible to respiratory disease and this disease comes along that affects your respiratory function, then that's not good. But I don't particularly feel vulnerable now because I'm vaccinated and I'm fit and healthy, and I've survived thus far through the coronavirus pandemic.
So you pivoted from in to out, did you? You went outdoors.
I did.
Yeah.
I decided that, well, first of all, I thought about what job I might do next. And I wrote down a very sensible list of jobs based on my skill set.
Like accountancy, like, and managing numbers like Kevin, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I've done that sort of thing before. I've been a cost management consultant before, so funnily enough, that was on my list to go back to that. And
what a guess! I don't know why, but I did pick up the fact that you liked spreadsheets, so I thought you and Kevin were sort of joined at the hip.
Exactly.
I do like a good spreadsheet.
You've got to have a good spreadsheet, Graham.
And so I had all of these sensible jobs on my list. And then the word adventurer added itself to my list without me really thinking about it. And I couldn't get beyond it. I kept thinking, well, that's the thing to do. That is what I need to do next. And as I say, I couldn't get beyond this idea that I wanted to have this adventure in my life. So that's what I did. And I was thinking about the first thing. I've got a bucket list that's absolutely overflowing with things that I want to do. And the first thing that I decided that I wanted to do was to walk the Southwest Coast Path, which is a long distance path that goes around parts of Dorset, parts of Somerset, and then all of Devon and Cornwall in the southwest.
It's not just long, is it? It's really long. I mean, how many miles is it? Because I've got a number in my mind, but I'm sure you'll tell us properly.
It's 630 miles long, which is just over 1,000 kilometres.
Wow.
That's a long way.
It's a long way. And although none of the cliffs are particularly high, the path goes up and down a lot. So it's the equivalent of 4 ascents of Everest from sea level in terms of the amount of climbing that you do as you walk.
Wow.
So yes, it's quite a strenuous path, and it took me quite a long time to walk it.
Okay, so you're just at that moment when you're thinking, I'm going to be an adventurer. I've identified this coastal path walk. And how were you going to turn that into something that would be more than just a walk?
I decided that because of my interest in environmental management, I wanted to do something good at the same time as walking. And that's always the way when I'm adventuring. I always want to have something else there, so it's not just about me. And so I decided to raise money for the Marine Conservation Society.
Okay.
I set myself a high fundraising target that I didn't meet, but I did raise £5,000 for them, which I think isn't so bad in the middle of a pandemic when people were feeling the strain and weren't carrying money with them and didn't want to talk to people, didn't want to get close to me. So I decided that I'd walk it for the Marine Conservation Society, which actually really helped me to finalise the decision that I was going, because it's all very well saying that you're going to do something, but once you've actually met with the charity, told them that you're going to raise however many thousands of pounds for them, you've got to go and do it.
Yeah,
you can't just then walk away from that agreement with those people. So,
I mean, forgive my lack of knowledge of this, but basically, it's not like you do, I don't know, 30 miles and go home and come back and then do another 30 miles, or is it? Or do you carry a sleeping bag and all the rest of that? Do you just sleep? You effectively did it in a one period.
I did it in one period. I nominally did it solo. So people did join me for a day or two here and there.
Yeah.
Mainly I was walking on my own, which is something that I'd never really done before. I carried everything that I needed on my back. So yes, I had my tent and my sleeping bag and my stove and food and what have you.
Wow.
I had to do that. I initially intended to walk it and stay in bed and breakfast in the hotels. But because of the coronavirus pandemic, once restrictions had lifted, everybody flooded down to the southwest and there just weren't rooms available.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I realised that I had to take a tent with me, and actually, of course, that added to the adventure. I was walking in autumn because the spring and summer weren't available. We were locked down.
Yeah.
So the weather was, let's just say, a lot more interesting than it would have been had I walked in the summer. And
we
I
get
had
it
to carry
worse
all
in
my
the
stuff
north
with me.
than they do in the south. It's like the south of France when you go down to, the south coast. But I mean, but I do understand the point you're making. It would have been throwing it down and very cold and probably snowy at times.
By the October, I was walking during October.
Okay. Right.
And towards the end of my walk, Storm Alex came in. It didn't bring any snow, but it did bring very heavy winds and very heavy rain.
Yeah.
And there were occasions when I couldn't walk. I got to the end of one headland and I couldn't take a step forwards because the wind was so strong. I had to sit down and shuffle around on my bottom. And then I decided that it wasn't very sensible to be walking along a cliff top path in those conditions. So I then walked inland for a few miles. And in fact, that continued for the next week or maybe even 2 weeks of walking, where I had to keep going inland to stay safe. Yeah. So yes, it was very windy. It was pretty cool by the end. I was camping almost right up until the end of my trip, which really surprised me because I feel the cold tremendously. But it was a fabulous experience.
All this sort of like navigation and cooking for yourself. Were you a Girl Guide? Is that something that you did when you were young?
I was, yes.
Yeah. It's a wild guess. I don't know. I haven't read that about you, but it's just, I think you have to have that mindset, don't you? You're, just it gives you confidence that, well, I'm going to take a stove out and I'm going to cook. And not everybody would naturally be able to do that, I think.
Well, to be fair, it didn't come that naturally to me. I have done camping, and I did camp as a Girl Guide, but I've only ever walked and camped with other people. I've never done this on my own before. And the first night I practiced. I practiced near where I lived. So the first night I went out in my tent on my own, wild camping. So I put my tent up in a field without permission. I just sort of hid away in a corner and left no trace. That's the thing. If you leave no trace, then people generally aren't too concerned about you doing it. Yeah. And I got in my tent that night and I zipped up the zip, and I was absolutely sure that there were going to be hooligans coming and driving donuts around the field that I was in. They'd spot my tent. They'd think I was fair game and they'd cause all sorts of trouble. And I was absolutely terrified because I was on my own. Yeah. And so it was worth having a go on my own. Of course, nothing happened. Nobody noticed I was there. Yeah. A badger came and sniffed my tent, and that was the extent of it. In the morning, I was damp when I woke up because I hadn't pitched my tent properly. So that's something else about practicing that's useful.
That's a really good idea, though. I mean, you, Kevin, if you're going to go anywhere on a holiday or on a walk, we as a family, we plan. We want to know where we're going to go. Have we got enough resources and all the rest of that, and water and all that kind of stuff. And that's what you did, that extra bit. You went out and camped just to give yourself that confidence, I guess, that, this isn't going to be too much for you.
Yes, indeed. And I could do that 10 or 15 miles from home, where if it all went horribly wrong, I could phone my husband and he could come and fetch me.
Yeah. He must be a very tolerant chap.
He was a very jealous chap when I was walking.
Well, he would have loved to have been walking with me. He caught up presumably every now and again.
He did, yes. Yeah. Walking the South West Coast Path was relatively straightforward. We lived in Malvern in Worcestershire at the time. It's a few hours drive. He dropped me off. So the first few days he walked with me. He walked with me for the last couple of days. And then in the middle, he joined me for a day or two as well.
I mean, you might not necessarily have to answer this, but basically my daughter has this is the dog that I'm going to inherit in a few weeks' time for a couple of weeks or so. She gallivants. So basically, she puts a little, is it an Apple tracker or something that on my phone I can actually see. It sort of says, "Oh, you've just walked around, 5 miles with the dog," and she can see that. And presumably, you have those sorts of things in your armory as well. You're able to. Your husband's able to track you.
There were times when we set things like that up, particularly actually when we were meeting, so that we could make sure we hadn't passed each other somewhere where we didn't see each other. Yeah. But generally, I stayed in touch with him. I called him and gave him my coordinates, told him where I was camping. Yeah. That wasn't always possible. I mean, the night when I was the most frightened on the path, there was no phone signal at all. And I was I was camping just a little bit to the side of the path, and if something had happened, all I could rely on was my whistle and some people that I could see on the other side of a river who were camping, so I could see their tent. But all I could rely on was my whistle to get attention. But when those things happened, I always told my husband that I was going to be, which stretch of the path I was on, and where I was likely to be. What sort of area I was likely to be camping. But you don't always have a phone signal, so you can't always rely on that sort of technology.
No, I guess no. I expect so. It's just I don't know. If my wife went off doing that, I'd be like, saying, yeah, fantastic, great. I've got a couple of weeks holiday. I don't want to know where you are, love. But no, actually, I would. I'd probably want to know exactly where she is. And I have to check myself for a tracker on myself every time I go out for a walk. But no, it's. I've got to say though, it's a remarkably brave thing that you did. Not only, but it's in addition to that. What an adventure! Every single day is different. I know you're still walking. You're walking on a coastal path, etc. But every single day is different.
Yes, you have that. The repetition of walking. So you get up, you walk, you make sure you find food and water, you plan for the following day, you go to sleep. So you have that repetition, but you're walking through different landscapes, you're meeting different people, you're just, as you say, having different experiences every day. It's just fabulous. I can highly recommend it. You don't have to have, it took me something like 7.5 weeks to walk the Southwest Coast Path, but you can walk a week of it. You can walk a weekend of it at a time. You don't have to do the whole lot, and I could highly recommend just going on more or less any long distance hike.
And daily, what would you have walked? 30 miles, something like that?
Oh goodness, no, nothing like that. No, I comfortably walk about 10 miles a day. So my average day was, I think, 12 or 13 miles when I was walking the Southwest Coast Path.
Because in fairness, it's not like on the flat though, is it? It's not like a canal walk like I do. And,
it's not on the flat, and you're carrying, there's quite a lot of weight in a rucksack with tent, sleeping bag, stove, food, water for the day, and what have you. So I do keep my pack weight as low as I can, but it does slow you down having that extra weight on.
It's still pretty impressive. That would be the equivalent of, give or take, 25,000 steps a day, which is pretty. What's a heck of a? It would be in my terms. Very impressive.
That's not the only walk you've done, Julia. You've gone on to do several more beyond that, haven't you?
I have. Last year, I walked parts of the Camino de Santiago twice.
Right.
Twice.
So I walked the French route for 4 weeks or so with a friend of mine in the summer, and that was walking in an absolute heat wave. That was fantastic because I wasn't carrying sleeping bag, tent, and what have you, because there are hostels along the route, so it was much, much lighter. And then in the winter, my husband and I walked for a week of the Portuguese route, ending in Santiago again.
Oh, so going north then?
Heading north, yes.
Yeah.
These are historic pilgrimage routes that people have walked for 1,000 years. Yeah. And I had the opportunity to walk them twice last year, and I've just actually published a book about my walking exploits on that as well. Which
comes out in May, I believe.
This one comes out today. It's being launched today, which is the 13th of April as we record this.
Right. Okay. So it does come out in May, because by the time people hear this podcast, it will be May. So basically, but that's really good news. And what's the book called?
It's called Walking the Camino: A Journey for the Heart and Soul.
Wow. And did you like Santiago? I took my family there, and it was incredibly impressive. Cathedral and all, everything. Just everything about it seemed very extraordinarily religious. But it was a moment. It was, if we had a bucket list that we didn't really know that we had, that would probably be on it. But we didn't do the walking like you did. I did a bit of walking on the coast of Galicia, because effectively there was a golf course there. And as Kevin knows, I would have done an awful
very long walk for Graham.
Definitely not in a straight line. But what was your impressions of Santiago?
Santiago is a fabulous historic city. Coming in from the French side, you come in through some very dull suburbs, but when you get into the centre, it is fabulous. It's when I was there, it was full of pilgrims. A lot of people landing in Santiago every day. It was a holy year, so there were more than usual, as well as there being a bit of a backlog of people from the coronavirus pandemic. So it was a very busy year last year. So there were lots of pilgrims, lots of people milling around, lots of historic buildings. The cathedral is really impressive as a building. It's a beautiful building, as are many of the others in that sort of section of the city. But for me, the really special point was going out to the coast. As you say, you walked on the coast of Galicia. A lot of pilgrims walk the extra 4 days from Santiago out to either Finisterre or Muxía, or indeed both.
Yeah.
I didn't walk it because I didn't have time on either trip, but I did go to those places. And it was at the end of my second Camino, standing on the cliffs at Finisterre with a lighthouse behind me and the sea in front, waves crashing down below me, and the wind, really strong wind blowing in my face, that really felt to me like the end of my Camino. That was where I felt I'd arrived, rather than at the cathedral in Santiago, which is something that some pilgrims feel. I'm not a Christian, so the cathedral for me isn't such an important place as it would be if I was a Christian.
No, I understand that. Whilst you were out there on that cliff, you'd have probably seen this old bloke hacking away around this golf course. And not out there last year. It was several years ago. It was actually a beautiful course, but I butchered it nonetheless. But nonetheless, moving on, you don't just walk, you don't just raise money. You also write books, as you've mentioned. And this book, Walking the Camino, this, as I said, out today as we record this. What will people find in that? Is that kind of a description of the journey, just your observations? How do you make it interesting for somebody to read that book?
I think that story is really important. For me, it's really important rather than just description. So my book is a story. The first part is a story from the French Camino that I walked in the summer. Yeah. The second part is a story of the winter Camino that I walked, the Portuguese route. Yeah. And then there's a section about advice for anybody who's considering walking their own Camino. And then finally, there's a bonus section, which I think really adds some colour to the book as well, which are stories from my Camino family. When you walk the Camino, often you end up walking in a group of people who perhaps didn't know each other before they set off. And people call it your Camino family. And so a number of my Camino family have written a small section each as well about their experience. So this covers my experience as a non-religious person walking the Camino. Yeah. And it also covers the experience of 6 or 7 other people who I walked with and became friends with, and how the Camino impacted on them, either as Christians or non-Christians as well.
Interesting. You no spreadsheets in there either, then, I suppose. No,
there are no spreadsheets in the book.
Oh, Kevin won't be buying it then.
Are any spreadsheets involved in the writing of the book?
Yes. Always, yes. I tend to do my planning on spreadsheets.
It does make sense, and you've written other books as well, and I'm looking now at one that's called Cycling King Alfred's Way. I should really know where that is, but isn't that in the Midlands somewhere? I don't know exactly where it is.
It's in the south. It starts in Winchester and it ends in Winchester. Actually, it goes in a big circle from Winchester. Right. It goes around past Stonehenge, past Avebury, and then further north, and then down the Thames Valley.
Oh, right. Okay.
And along the South Downs Way back into Winchester.
They have the only reason I know that, I know, but they have a Tesla charging station in, I think it's at Avebury, on the is it the A303, and we have to charge there because we go to Bournemouth, and they don't have a Tesla charging station. Which is, if you're listening to this, Mr. Musk, then please get one in Bournemouth. We love Bournemouth, and you did this on the bike.
I did. I was cycling with a friend, my friend Alison. And her partner made me a bike to ride, which is fantastic. He likes doing this. He does this as a hobby. So he lent me this fabulous bike to ride for the duration. So I was riding a top-notch mountain bike.
Wow.
It's a mainly off-road route, which is why I was riding a mountain bike. Yeah. Lots of people cycle it on gravel bikes as well.
Right.
And it was another adventure. It was an adventure in friendship between the two of us, in adversity, in learning a little bit more about those voices in my head and making sure that I'm saying the right things to myself.
You're not going to reveal it here, but how long did it take you to find out just about everything about her? Day one, presumably.
We've known each other since we were knee-high to a grasshopper, so we knew most things about each other already, to be fair.
That's all right then. But you couldn't have really. How many miles is this? I mean,
that one is 350 kilometers, 217 miles, I think.
Oh, so it's just a day then? You did it in a day or so?
Oh, yes. It didn't take 4 days at all. 5, 4.5, something like that.
No, well, that's fine. And actually, what a wonderful thing, because effectively off-road biking, what an exciting adventure that is.
It was really lovely in parts. It was just beautiful. There were parts we were up on the Ridgeway, and we were just cycling through cloud for a day, and we were in the cloud, and the cycling just isn't great along that bit of the path. There are ridges and furrows, so you're either trying to keep your tire on a narrow ridge and not fall into a furrow, or in a furrow and not hit the side and fall off the bike. So for me, that was quite technical riding, and we were in the cloud all day. Apparently there are beautiful views from the Ridgeway North, but we didn't see beyond about 3 meters. So, it wasn't all sunshine and laughter, but the experience as a whole was fabulous, and the sun did come out again the following day, and we had great fun completing the ride.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, you're an author. How many books altogether have you published so far?
I have published 3 books now. Live Your Bucket List, Cycling King Alfred's Way, and Walking the Camino. Yeah. And then you alluded to a book launch in May. Mm-hmm. I've got a book that I've written that Cicerone are publishing, which is about 15 short walks on the Malvern Hills.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Which is going to be published in May. And I have another book of the 10 best pub walks in South Wales coast that's being published in July.
So this is now becoming something of a career for you.
That is the intention, yes.
Yeah.
To adventure and to encourage other people to adventure and to get out there and to just enjoy being out in the world.
So are you a role model? A bit like Kevin is to me with his spreadsheets and, dogs and stuff.
Well, I don't know whether I'm a role model. I sort of rather hope that I am. And I was on another podcast recently, and I'd spoken to the woman who runs a podcast when I first launched Live Your Bucket List. Yeah. And she said to me when I came back on that one of her clients had said to her that she'd started walking up mountains, having listened to my podcast about Live Your Bucket List. She'd thought, well, actually, I've always wanted to walk up mountains. If other people can do it, I can do it. Let's go out there and do it. And she did. Yeah. So that to me is the best response. People going out there and doing whatever it is that they really want to do with their lives.
Kevin, what's on your bucket list that we don't know about?
All sorts on my bucket list. Getting round to it's a big challenge. Big challenge. So I might well be getting a hold of Julia's book. But the bigger question to me, well, there's 2 questions sitting in my mind right now. Number 1, Julia's, how did you get into book writing in the first place? Number 2 is, can you actually make a sensible income out of it?
Okay, number 1, how did I get into writing books in the first place? As you know, I decided to live this life of adventure, and I like to give back. And this is my way to give back from that life of adventure, to encourage other people, help other people, support other people in their own journeys. So that's why I write. I had toyed with writing in the past when I was a consultant and employed, and I'd written the odd article for people, and I'd really wanted to get more into it, but I just didn't have an opportunity to give it my full attention. And when I switched into a life of adventure, I thought, well, this is the time that I can give it a proper amount of attention and see if I can write a whole book. I love reading books. I read a huge number of books. So to me, writing books was the right way to go. So that was how. And can you make a living as an author? That is up for debate. The average income for a full-time author, there was a recent report out that said it was something like $7,000 or pounds a year.
Yeah.
Self-published authors, I believe the number is higher. There's just been some research done by the Alliance of Independent Authors, and they're releasing that next week, but they've given a little teaser that it's higher for self-published authors. But there are people around who make a living out of being an author. There are people around who make a living out of being an outdoor author. And my income is ramping up. So it is improving, and I fully intend to prove that it is a possibility, Kevin.
It's probably not the book itself that you're going to make the money from, is it? I mean, I think maybe that's where you were going, Kevin, I guess. But I mean, lots of people that we've interviewed over the years, but also things that I'm involved in myself right now, developing my business. It's the book is almost not quite incidental, but it's kind of important. But other things are likely to make, if that's your aim, make money. Because what you said earlier is you're giving back, which is this podcast. This podcast isn't about making money. This podcast is about giving back. Kevin and I are both in our 60s, and we've lived lives in corporate and all the rest of that, and started our own businesses. And we just find people fascinating, don't we, Kevin? I mean, and
we do, and
no exception.
Probably over 7 years of doing this podcast, haven't even covered the cost of putting it together. So it's very definitely a piece of
no.
As far as we're concerned,
it definitely helps sometimes with solidifying relationships with clients and so forth, and various other people who come onto the podcast. But truthfully, it's not really that. And there is a part of an awareness thing, and then that potentially that brings people towards us. But in your case, you would expect, if you take the live your bucket list, I would imagine you're not alone in using the word bucket list. And so it's how would you make that come alive? And you've just given us a great example of somebody who wants to walk up mountains. Because if in the south, that's like 1,000 feet, a mountain. But in the north, we know that it's a bit taller than that. But the end of the day, but I wonder whether or not there's like courses and membership sites and various other ways in which you can almost get somebody from couch to top of a mountain.
A lot of people do use their books for that purpose. So their book is almost a calling card for them, almost a business card, from which they launch their training and their consultancy and what have you. For me, that's not particularly the intention. Although if people come to me and ask me for such things, then I will, of course, do that. I do public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So I talk to, I'll give a keynote speech at a conference or talk to clubs and societies. I do that side of things, not so much the consulting, the training and what have you. And the reason for that is because I want to be out there adventuring and sharing that joy of adventure with people, rather than mired in all of these other things that could be going on around it. And of course, the writing takes a lot of my time already.
I mean, in fact, it's very refreshing that you want to do that. And actually, as we said earlier in the discussion, that you basically, it's almost self-preservation that you spend a bit of time exercising those lungs of yours.
Absolutely. It's really important for me. It's important for everybody, but it's particularly important for me to maintain a good level of fitness. And this is one way to do it, make it part of my working life. Yeah.
I've got to say, one good thing that came from COVID for me was I got out more. I have got out more consistently, and now it's a bit like, it's 9:38 as I'm talking. I would be normally outside walking. I do my morning constitutional of about 5 miles or so, and I feel really what's the right word? I feel that I've let myself down if I'm not out there every day. And I don't know whether that's something that other people who started walking during this period are finding. Others might have just gone back to the couch. But for me, it's almost important. It's important to me to try and get out every day and do my 10,000 steps. Because as soon as 10,000 steps comes up on the iPhone, then I'm thinking, right, I'm sitting down for the rest of the day. But I mean, for you, that's probably, it's only 5 miles. I mean, you presumably you're doing a lot more than that every day anyway.
I don't walk that far every day necessarily,
okay,
but I do walk every day.
Yeah.
My husband and I have had on our bucket list. you might enjoy this. We have a 10-year plan, my husband and I, and that's actually why we walked the Camino, to update our 10-year plan.
Yeah.
And in our 10-year plan, from 2009, when we got married, that's when we first wrote our 10-year plan.
Okay.
We said that within 10 years we would live by the sea. We've both always wanted to live by the sea, and now we do.
Oh wow!
And so every morning we go for a walk on the beach.
Have they brought the sea to the Malvern Hills then?
No, I mean,
an achievement.
We love that. That would be good. But I mean, Malvern was the perfect place to live. We loved living in Malvern.
Yeah.
The only thing Malvern's missing is the sea. If it had the sea, it would be absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
And so with a slightly heavy heart, but excited about our future as well, we left Malvern, and we now live in southwest Wales, in Llanelli.
Oh, wow.
And we go for a walk on the beach every morning, and we see the beach change every day, and we see the birds and the view. I think going outside and going for a walk and having those long distance views, so your eyes are focusing on something way in the distance. There's something about that that's really special.
Kevin, you walk your dog, don't you?
Oh yeah, every day. Well, twice a day, most days.
Yeah.
That's the problem with a spaniel. You need to give it exercise.
You do.
But I must admit that I do get a little bit bored with doing the same routes. So one of the things on my list at the moment is, how do I vary this, particularly as the weather gets better during the summer? That's going to be interesting. But Julia, you said you walked the Camino to update your 10-year plan. So what's on the 10-year plan coming up? What's in store?
Well, the thing that we realised we wanted to do is there's something very repetitive about walking on a long distance hike. And that's very meditative as well. And it's very simple. And we realized we wanted to keep things fairly simple. I say fairly because we're no good at keeping things totally simple. We're too excited about life. We want to do too many things. But we talked a lot about our values. And two of our strongest values, one of them is to leave a legacy and to really make a big difference in this world as much as we can. And the second of our strongest values is to live a life full of adventure. Now, sometimes those come into conflict with each other. For example, Mike has always wanted to go to New Zealand. And we actually got to the stage of deciding to go to New Zealand. And then we couldn't bring ourselves to book the flights because of the climate change issues of flying over there. So you sometimes find that this adventure and wanting to leave a legacy and make a positive difference come into conflict with each other. We spent some time talking about that, and we think we found a way to marry the two, which involves volunteering and traveling around the world at the same time. We are going to fly to New Zealand because we've realized that we've known this, but we've realized that we've stopped ourselves from doing these things. I've always wanted to go to Japan, and we've stopped ourselves from doing these things for so long. And in reality, a flight each to New Zealand coming back via Japan is not going to make that much difference. You know, we're not profligate with our flights and what have you. So, and when we get there, we're going to work on environmental and social projects with people, volunteering and staying in communities. So that's our way of reconciling the two things. And we've got a trip in Europe. But
I mean, in the positive column, Julia, don't worry about it. But in the time that you're away, the Chinese will have built about 1,400 trying to think of the word, Kevin.
Power stations.
Demonstrating old age, you see.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, but they're digging for coal as we're driving Teslas, but it's a different world out there. But I respect the fact that you want to look after the world in that sense. I'm not particularly of your persuasion when it comes to climate change. I think it's just one of those things that happens over time. But that's another story. Having said that, I respect your view to follow that as a way forward. But the world's not following your tune at the moment when it comes to people like countries like China, for instance, with their strategies. But from my point of view, if you're actually balancing off a trip to not only New Zealand but Japan is definitely on our bucket list. Is there a walk or something that you would do in Japan? because you'd definitely need one of those iPhone apps, wouldn't you? Because I mean, not many folk there speak English.
Yes, and I have to say my Japanese extends to between 0 and 1 word.
Yeah. No, and in fairness, that I think you would probably do the niceties, wouldn't you? Please, thank you, and all the rest of that.
Yeah.
But having said that, and I think they would appreciate that. But the truth is, you would need an app.
Yes, I think so. In Japan, there are lots of hiking trails. There are pilgrimage routes, and I love the idea of walking some of the pilgrimage routes in Japan. Yeah. And there's also a route that's been built along the tsunami, the places that were hit by the tsunami.
Okay, yeah.
And the idea about this hiking trail is to bring people to the area to help build the economy, but also people are walking it to help process their grief at what happened with the tsunami in Japan. So I would love to walk that trail as well. Yes.
That's some time ago, isn't it? I mean, we forget, don't we? How long ago was that? How long was this? It must have been 10 years or so.
I don't remember, I'm afraid.
No, I've got to say, yeah. Where's AI when you need it?
Around about that. Yes, yeah, but that's interesting. Japan's on your bucket list. New Zealand's on mine. Ruth and I have talked about that. We're even talking about maybe we'll make it happen next year. Don't know.
Well, I shall see you there then.
Yeah. Well, we have family in New Zealand, so we definitely do. Like you, we would probably team up the two, because I think it's and there are probably other places out there that you'd want to go to as well. New Zealand, when you're in New Zealand, presumably there's a lot of hill walking.
Yes, there are lots of lovely trails in New Zealand as well.
And Lord of the Rings is something on your, presumably is one of the books that you've read.
Of course. And films that I've seen as well. And they have something that one of my friends pointed me to the other day, is that they have a halfling half marathon where you can run through Hobbiton and and run past all of the little round doored houses and what have you. So I quite fancy taking part in that while we're there, if we end up there at the right time of year.
I'm sure you will. And actually, but the beauty of this is that you will be probably taking notes in some form or other, because it's going to be difficult to recall everything in precise detail. But when you're walking, there's nothing stopping you just sort of reading, dictating into your phone, which will probably automatically now, with the help of AI, produce the book before you get home. But it's scary. But having said that, Japan, New Zealand, anything else?
Norway, Sweden, and France. And possibly some Eastern European countries as well. Okay.
All right. So is it a geographic thing more than anything else? Is it just simply exploring countries that you've never been to? Or is there something else that you can define adventure just by being slightly different? Maybe it's an adventure to become, I don't know, an artist or something to express yourself. Music, maybe. Is it something that you can express yourself? Is that equally important, or does there has to be an element of exercise?
For me, it could be anything. So on my bucket list, I've got learning another language.
Ah, right.
As well, it's not all
Japanese will do.
Physical things. Yeah. Japanese might take me some time. Yeah. I did spend some time last year learning some Spanish before heading out to Spain, and practicing it when I was there. But I'm nowhere near fluent. Yeah. And I would like to be fluent in another language one day. But it's really finding the right opportunity to do that. The time when my heart's really in it, because these things are hard to do. Yeah. I'd like to be able to sing, but I think that can wait until I get back. And
you have a lovely a melody in the way in which you pronounce words and so forth. I think you'd be a great singer.
Oh, if only I could turn that into tunefulness.
All right.
We shall see. Maybe in the fullness of time I will.
Yeah, adventure's an interesting one though, and I read a book by Laura van der Kam recently. It's called Tranquility by Tuesday, and she's sort of packaging in this book all of the time management things she's learned over a huge number of years. One thing she talks about is making sure you plan an adventure every week. And she even says you should plan a big adventure and a little adventure. And that really hit home to me, that we go on and just live this kind of mundane rinse and repeat life a lot of the time. And the reason we're doing that is possibly by not planning in the adventures. And we've talked about some pretty big ones today, but there's lots of little ones. And kind of this hit home to myself and my wife that we started reflecting back to COVID, being locked in for several months. And in a way, it changed the way we did things. You kind of got used to not doing stuff. You kind of got used to being in the same four walls. And I think for us, and maybe for a lot of other people, that over that period, it's made us generally less adventurous as individuals. And certainly something I'm trying to do at the moment is reverse that. Like week past Sunday, we went chocolate making. That was huge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We've got a weekend book coming up in a few weeks' time to go and make gin.
Fantastic.
This is all consumable stuff, Kevin. I mean, you know, I'm not sure it's necessarily good for your heart.
No, it probably isn't. the amount of chocolate we walked away from the chocolate maker with is definitely not good for heart or stomach, Graham. But it's not good for making it.
No. It does sound like an interesting day out, though. Chocolate. I've done the gin thing, the slow gin thing, and that was fantastic.
Something that my husband and I do for Christmas sometimes is we call it the 12 dates of Christmas. And we get 6 months each of the following year. And in each of those months, we organise a date that we think the other person would enjoy. Wow. And that's when we've done things like make mugs and sometimes it's walking weekends. But, we shake it up a bit and put other things in there as well.
I mean, I have to say, people listening to this will be so impressed with how you pivoted from the other things that you were doing in your life to something where you took, 5 weeks to walk 630 miles of some fairly some difficult terrain, and you were staying out each night doing that on your own. Amazing courage, amazing sort of strength, purpose. And you've gone on to do the Camino walks. You've got the bicycle walks. You know what I mean? And basically, at the end of the day, you've really pushed yourself to be something else. So when our listeners, and Kevin talks a bit about corporate escape, what we both do, you've escaped corporate and you've replaced it with this wonderful outdoor adventure. Yes, a little bit of author work, speaker work, etc. And you're replacing the money that you might have had. Whether it's all the money, it doesn't really matter. Because ultimately, what you're doing is you're far more fulfilled, and the chances are it'll more than replace whatever you had before. But the beauty is also you're looking after your body and your mind and your soul, and I think all of that speaks very well of you.
This is absolutely about living life, and for us, that does mean adventure, and it does mean contribution as well. But it's about living life, really making the most of every day. And Kevin was talking about the micro adventures as well. There's actually, Alistair Humphreys has written a book about micro adventures that you might be interested in, Kevin, that encourages you to go out and do the small things on your doorstep, and not necessarily, adventures don't have to be around the other side of the world or hiking 630 miles. It could be sleeping on top of your local hill or climbing a tree. It doesn't have to be some massive thing.
Talked about do we go and spend a weekend actually being tourists in Newcastle? No, local city, loads of things to see. Do we ever do them? No, because they're on the doorstep.
Yeah, something like that.
You wouldn't be allowed to wear your shirt though, Kevin, would you? At the end of the day, I mean, they're all bare-chested. Oh, sorry, that's just the women. But in Newcastle, no, it's no. I agree with you, Kevin. It would be an amazing. It's something that you probably have never done.
Yeah, and there's a museum in Newcastle, the Discovery Museum. I've wanted to go there since the thing opened, but have I been there?
Well, never. Just go there. You'll be all right. Just miss out on the Newcastle United match and go there instead. That should do the trick. But
Leeds United would be no competition.
Well, that's true. There's no reason. That's true. So Julia, you've been a fantastic guest. It's been wonderful learning from you and being inspired. Whether that's a small thing that we're going to do more of or a big thing, you've been a very inspiring guest. Thank you for joining us today on the Next 100 Days podcast.
Graham, what's on your bucket list?
Oh, we were talking with Julia just a minute ago, and one of the things that Don and I want to do is go to Japan, and I think there's a lot to be experienced there, and I think there are other things. We love America. We'd probably go back there. Geographically, those are the sorts of things that we would probably want to do, is to experience other things, and that would be in the bucket called adventure. But there's so many other things as well. Back in the day, Kevin, I used to do portraits, but it's a bit like, how much time can I devote to doing that when I'm researching 1,001 other things? And it's a question of choice. And one of the things that I picked up from Julia is the importance of talking to your spouse about your choices. And we talked not too long ago about retiring and having a plan for your time. And I think this is another example of, okay, there's lots to be done, but what's at the top of that bucket list as opposed to being, 330th?
Yeah. And I think, we've got some ideas floating around, but I don't think I've ever sat down and written the bucket list out and consciously thought about planning around making it happen. Maybe it's time to think about doing that. Is one thing that certainly I mentioned when we were talking to Julia, the book from Laura van der Kam, where she's basically saying, look, if you don't go and plan the mini adventure, the mini adventure won't happen.
No.
It's no good saying on sort of Saturday morning to your spouse, what are we going to do this weekend then?
No.
The answer will be pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
I will go do the shopping. We'll clean the house. We'll do whatever. No, but if you're sitting down saying, what are we going to do next weekend? Then some ideas come out, and you think, well, yeah, we need to plan that a little bit. Okay, we need some train tickets, or we might need a hotel, or we need to do a bit more research about when that's open, or whatever. Yeah. So to me, the big lesson around adventure, big or small, is start putting together a plan.
Yeah.
Unless you do it, it's not going to happen.
No, I agree with you. I completely agree with you. And the future there is for everybody to write. And you have the opportunity of writing your own future. Doesn't mean to say you have to give up on your corporate job just yet to be outdoors like Julia has been. But it does mean that you might want to sort of consider that path towards moving into something that you really want to do. And if that's a financial or a commercial thing, but also in addition to that, you might want to be thinking about, well, how am I going to achieve those life goals, those things that I really want to achieve before something happens to me that would stop me from doing so. And there after that point, then you're going to be living a life of some regret. And I think that's something that we didn't really pick up with Julia, but at the end of the day, if you're all in on it, then there is no regrets, is there?
No, absolutely.
So another really interesting podcast with Julia Goodfellow-Smith. Today I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.